Happy Monday morning, everybody. Welcome into another week, a brand new week of Morning Jocks here. Conrad Van Order, John Saber with you until 7 o'clock. Damian Mitchell will be back with us tomorrow morning. But, man, we have a lot to get into today. A lot of people not happy in the college football world. Some other people are very happy with the way that things went yesterday. And over the weekend as a whole, because we did have conference championship weekend, had some really entertaining games, had, well, one in particular, but a couple of games that were really not entertaining at all. But ultimately, how did that impact things yesterday on Selection Sunday? Well, for one team, it didn't really seem to affect them at all. And for some others, disappointment and frustration was there was a lot of it yesterday. To say the least. So we appreciate you tuning in to us here this morning as we have a lot to get to. We want to hear from you because we know a lot of you have thoughts on what happened over the weekend. But we will start with the headline that if you have been living under a rock for the last 19 hours or so, you wouldn't have seen. But we'll get it right off the top. Alabama is going to be in the college football playoff as a 9 seed. Withstanding what happened in Atlanta on Saturday, I was there. It was ugly. It was a really, really poor showing, and we will get into that and what went wrong for Alabama because there was a lot. There's very little that went right in that game on Saturday, but ultimately it doesn't hurt you if you're an Alabama member of the Alabama Crimson Tide because you stayed exactly where you were in the rankings. You went into the game ranked 9th. You came out of the game ranked 9th. Even after a 28-7 loss at the hands of the Georgia Bulldogs. So Alabama, they will face Oklahoma in Norman for a rematch of a game we will have now seen for the third time in the past 13 months. Oklahoma won the first two meetings, but Alabama as the 9 seed, Oklahoma the 8 seed, they will travel to Norman and take on the Sooners on Friday, December the 19th. So that is not this Friday, but next Friday. So about 12 days from now, that is where the Crimson Tide will be headed. And that was the big question. Who's going to be at number 9 and number 10? Because we knew 1 through 8 was very solid in the rankings. Then you knew you were going to have 2 more conference champions in the back end. And so the question was it going to be Alabama, Notre Dame, or Miami? What combination of 2 of those 3 teams were going to get in? It had been Alabama 9, Notre Dame 10 going into Selection Sunday. And, of course, as is tradition, the committee loves to make drastic moves on the last weekend that they should have made weeks prior, similar to what you saw last week when they moved Alabama over Notre Dame and everyone got mad. They should have gotten mad because that should have been done weeks ago, not because it happened, but because it happened at a point where the committee really didn't have a good reason to do so when they should have just never put themselves in that situation in the first place. Similarly, they've had Miami and Notre Dame separated in the rankings for some time despite Miami's head-to-head. As they've continued to get closer and closer in the rankings, they continue to evaluate that. And then, of course, on Saturday, with neither of those teams in action, they said they had seen enough, and they decided that Miami, they would honor the head-to-head. So Miami, they get in as the 10 seed. They're going to take on Texas A&M in the college football playoff there in College Station. And Notre Dame, they are literally going to be sitting at home because they decided to act like spoiled children yesterday, and they will not be participating in a bowl game now. But Notre Dame, they get left out after being in the rankings the entire time, and Miami, they get the final spot in the college football playoff. What were your thoughts, Saber, just going into Sunday? I know a lot of people after the games wrapped up on Saturday, there was a lot of debate. A lot of people honestly felt really good about Notre Dame's spot, and they thought it was going to come down to Alabama or Miami for that final spot. And it turns out all along that the debate maybe for a minute was about Alabama, but they seemed pretty set on where Alabama was, and the debate really came down to Miami, Notre Dame. And they ultimately do, in my opinion, the right thing, but a decision that was maybe a little overdue in putting Miami over Notre Dame.
I posted on social media that I secretly wanted something like this to happen when Notre Dame, before the BYU-Texas Tech game, I don't know if they posted, I don't know if they changed their profile picture or what.
Oh, they did.
In essence, they changed their profile picture to the logo of Texas Tech. but in Notre Dame colors.
Yes.
In essence, like we're all Texas Tech fans today, and then did the same thing with Georgia. And I posted that I kind of hope Notre Dame gets left out because of chicken bleep stuff like this. Like, what are you doing? Like, all right, like I can understand that you want this, but out here making an official post for something like what are we doing? Like, it's you're not as lame as you want to be, but you kind of are in doing this. So part of me kind of wanted that committee to be like, you know, if you're going to do juvenile stuff like this, we're going to do that. And sure enough, they ended up backing that ass up like they were juvenile because I'm truly surprised that Notre Dame was left out and that Alabama was in. I thought that, one, I guess I didn't see Duke winning, so I assumed it will be down to 1. And it felt eerily similar to what happened last year. I remember once SMU ended up losing because that ACC game was the later game. I remember turning to my girlfriend and telling her, hey, you just saw Alabama make the playoff, you know, because of that. Like, Clemson won, SMU's like they're going to drop, and Alabama's in. And I remember being completely shocked last year. Like, wow, I can't believe they did. You know what? Good on the committee for doing that. And ultimately good on the committee for ultimately getting, I think, things right. But the process you went to get everything right,
correct,
was just a bit like, all right, like you're doing too much because you didn't have to go through all of this. And some of it may be having that weekly show itself. That's a discussion we can have later on and the necessity of it. But overall, just those 3-4 hours, everything going on during the show. In fact, even they had a like a bowl preview, whatever show kind of after, when it was released that Notre Dame put out some kind of graphic that we're taking our ball and going home. Seeing that reaction, it was a completely wild day, and one that honestly, even though it worked out for the good guys around here, we wouldn't have it any other way. Like this is kind of part of the sport that we love, right? The drama and the excitement around it.
Yeah, no doubt. And I understand there's a lot of criticism about, you know, why do we even do the Tuesday night shows at this point if they're just, you know, and a lot of it coming from Notre Dame fans, right? Of if those rankings don't ever matter, why don't we just do one rankings like yesterday, and that's the rankings, right? And they don't tell you until the end because, admittedly, like I understand, like you said, I think the committee ultimately got it right. I think this was the right way to go. It's just the way they went about it and got there was really, really messy. And if you don't put Alabama behind Notre Dame after the Oklahoma loss, and maybe you don't put Notre Dame so high, or because remember the first time the rankings came out, everyone went, "Why is Notre Dame as high as they are?" Because they had already had 2 losses.
Right, yeah.
And so it's the reality of the committee. They ranked Alabama too low. They overreacted on that. They overreacted on Notre Dame at the beginning, and they overreacted on Miami at some point. And so, you know, because of that, it created these optics that they don't know what they're doing. When ultimately they got the right teams in my opinion, they just you know, instead of taking a straight line to that point, they decided to go all the way around it and then get to that point. And I think that's why a lot of people were upset. A lot of people not a big fan of Hunter Yurachek and his explanations for why the committee has done what they have done. I think that's a fair assessment. He has not been great. And it's been a unique circumstance this year with Mac Rhodes having to leave and him step in, but it hasn't been great. That's the reality of it. But this was Hunter Yurachek yesterday on ESPN, part of the broadcast. This was him when Reese Davis asked him to explain the reasoning for Alabama staying put at number 9 and finding themselves in the college football playoff.
Evaluated all of those conference championship games and felt like in the end, regardless of Alabama's performance yesterday, their body of work in those first 12 games where they had probably the best win, arguably this season, winning at number 3 Georgia, having to win against Vanderbilt, wins against Tennessee as well. Their strength of schedule was the highest in the top 11, and we felt like in spite of their performance yesterday in the conference championship, they deserve to stay in that 9 spot.
So there you go. Despite what happened in Atlanta on Saturday, Hunter Yurachek talking about, again, that middle part of the season when we go back and we had talked about at the time of, you know, Alabama for the first time ever beating 4 ranked opponents 4 consecutive weeks without a bye. That's why they're in the playoff, right? Because, I mean, you could hear it right there. That included the Georgia win. which is now I think a lot of people would say the best win in the country, maybe the second best after Indiana beat Ohio State. But that clear, I mean, yes, you got blown out on Saturday, but you also it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? Because if you're Alabama in a good way, because now you say, well, okay, yeah, we lost and we lost in convincing fashion, but hey, we also beat the SEC champions and we're the only team that has beaten them. So I think a lot of those arguments went Alabama's favor, but again, I can also understand that it doesn't make a lot of sense when 2 weeks ago the committee all they wanted to talk about was who you had lost to, and why Alabama, having lost to Florida State, was keeping them behind Notre Dame. And then yesterday they're getting touted for their wins, and that's why they're staying at again.
And how poorly they ran the ball.
It doesn't make it doesn't make sense. The way that they explain things, I think, is horrible. Their communication skills are quite poor, in my opinion. But I can't really complain with the end result. It's just everything around it needs to be improved, and they need to find a better way of going through this process because the process itself seems flawed. But I will tip my cap because, again, in my opinion, I think at the end of the day that they did ultimately get it right. And now Alabama, they will find themselves in the playoff. And quickly, if you just want to kind of go through what the field's going to look like. So your 12 seed, that's going to be James Madison. They get in because Duke wins the ACC title in overtime over Virginia. So they're going to go to Eugene, Oregon, take on the Ducks there, who are the 5 seed. We just told you Alabama, they're going to take on Oklahoma there in the 9-8 matchup in Norman. Ole Miss, they get to host Tulane. So not only do they get to host a home game, but they get a team that they beat pretty bad earlier this year in a rematch in the first round. So you would imagine probably going to be looking forward to the quarterfinals if you're Ole Miss with that matchup. And then Miami and Texas A&M, that's your 10-7 matchup there in College Station. The winner of Texas A&M Miami, they'll play Ohio State. Winner of Ole Miss Tulane plays Georgia. Winner of Alabama Oklahoma will play the number 1 seed Indiana, and the winner of Oregon JMU will play Texas Tech. So that's the way that it all lines up. This week they're going to be off. The next week is a game week, and we have the Alabama Oklahoma game next Friday, and the other 3 first-round games will be on Saturday. So that's what we're looking for now. Alabama in, Miami in, Notre Dame out. And a lot of you chiming in with your reaction, 205-834-9450 on the courtesy GMC text line. A lot to get to. We do have to talk about the game on Saturday. I know it ultimately didn't matter, but moving forward, what went wrong for Alabama on Saturday? Because there was a lot of it, and how much of it do you need to be concerned about carrying over to the playoffs and that rematch with Oklahoma? We'll dive into a bad day in Atlanta for the Crimson Tide next here on JOX. 6:17 here on your Monday morning. Welcome into Morning Jocks. Conrad and John Saber here with you until 7 o'clock when we will hand you off to McElroy and Kubelik in the morning, as I expect it'll be a very interesting, a very fun-filled day of reaction here across Jocks, as I know many of you have thoughts on Alabama. A lot of you excited to know that Alabama is going to be in the college football playoff, something they were not able to accomplish last year. And I know right now, maybe a lot of excitement, but it'll be interesting to kind of see what people's expectations are for the Crimson Tide in the college football playoff, because I think it's clear right now nobody really is viewing them. Maybe internally they are, but I think, from maybe the fan perspective and the media perspective, nobody necessarily expecting Alabama to be a national championship contender. But is this a team that you think could get in? And if you get past Oklahoma, maybe give Indiana a run for their money. But we've got some time to talk about that as those games don't get started for about a week and a half anyways. And we're going to get some of your calls and text here in just a minute. But we do have to take a look back quickly at what happened on Saturday in Atlanta. Why were so many people mad that Alabama still got in? Well, it's probably because their performance on Saturday was quite lackluster against the Georgia Bulldogs. So Georgia wins 28-7, and it was pretty early on for them. It was a physical game to start off. I will say, being there in Atlanta, there wasn't the usual buzz around this kind of a game. I've been to a couple of SEC championships in the past, and you could just tell, right? Even though, because going into it, nobody thought Alabama was going to get blown out the way that they did. So the assumption was, all right, it's going to be a close game. Both teams are banged up, probably going to be lower scoring, but they're both going to make the playoffs, so it doesn't really matter that much. Now, as the game got going, you could tell the Georgia fans there were really getting into it, because for them, right, this is a revenge game. They're kind of slaying the dragon, so to speak, that has been Alabama, that's given them so many problems over the years. But there just wasn't that usual buzz around it. And maybe that carried over for Alabama, because they looked like a team that had no juice out on the field. So early on, though, both teams were physical, not really able to do a whole lot offensively. But it really did feel like when Georgia got that block punt in the first quarter and then was able to turn that into a quick touchdown, that's where if you're Georgia, you have to give them a ton of credit, because they took the momentum in that moment, and they really didn't give it up for about the next 53 minutes or however long it was left in the game at that point. That was it. That really felt like it was it. Because you just saw Alabama had nothing going for them offensively, and that really carried on until the fourth quarter. So Alabama, they finished the day with -3 rushing yards. Now, granted, that's because Ty Simpson was taking some sacks, and he finished with -28 yards. But if you take away Ty Simpson and what his struggles were with sacks.
Oh, it was 31 rushing
and the
yards.
offensive
Okay.
line, correct. It was
Much better.
It wasn't pretty. Daniel Hill, 4 carries for 11 yards, AK Deer, 3 carries for 10 yards. Those were your leading rushers on the day if you were Alabama.
Were you frustrated that they kept trying to run the ball? Or more so, I guess I know you were frustrated that they couldn't run the ball, but were you frustrated that they kept trying?
It just felt it was more so for me that a lot of the play calling felt very vanilla, and I guess a lot of it too, right? The offensive line had a rough day, and that really kind of limits what you're able to do offensively. But I just go back to the first game against Georgia, and I would say that, that was probably the peak of this Alabama team all year long. That was probably the best they played in the first half of that game. Very similar to last year, where you could say the best Alabama played all year was in the first half against Georgia. But nonetheless, it felt like in that first game, though, Ryan Grubb really was locked in. Like he was on his A game that first matchup. It did not feel like he was on his A game this week. And maybe that was just because of the injuries. They were limited in what they were able to execute. But, yeah,
Well, I've heard people say that, like, you can't run the ball. Why aren't you throwing the ball? Well, they have to keep trying to run the ball, because if
Correct.
Georgia knows that you're going to throw the ball, like, there's no point in having linemen. You could just have 10, 11 DBs back there, and if all Alabama is going to do is throw the ball, then there's no point in that. That's why you got to keep running it. And it looked like, for the most part, Granted, okay, yeah, I know you read off the stats, but it felt like a good number of the runs, especially on first down, would go for like 3-4 yards. It's like, okay, all right, like seems like things were rolling. And then second down, it would either be an overthrow or a drop, and then all of a sudden here we are again. It's 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7, 3rd and 5, and it's like, okay. And
Mm-hmm.
I get why they kept doing it. It was sad to see them not continually doing it, but you have to keep doing it.
Yeah, no, and you're absolutely right about that. But I think, and this has been a year-long thing, but it's just the amount of times that it felt like you had a situation where it was, 3rd and 3, you had the 4th and 2 late in the game that we'll talk about in a second, but, things like that where traditionally you're telling me you can't run the ball for 3 yards. Well, you can't. You literally can't do it this year. And, to your point, Saber, it did feel like, at least on the first couple drives, like, all right, we're running for 4 yards here, 5 yards here, getting a couple runs. And that was really it after those first couple drives where the offense wasn't doing anything anyways. And so even if you were being able to get, decent 4-yard runs, you weren't able to execute on 3rd and short. And some of these pass plays were they were off. And again, as I'll give Ty Simpson some credit, right? Because the offensive line was struggling. And there were a lot of times where he was running for his life or there was a defender in his face and he was having to make tough throws and he was off the mark. But again, you can't escape the reality. And the interception, again, it was his fault in the sense that it was a bad throw that was behind a guy, but it was also a tip ball by a defense. It was a great play by the defense. Again, it wasn't, even if it was a great throw by Ty, I don't think it's a completion, but it's maybe not an interception. So, you can put some of that blame on him still. But again, regardless of what it is, I know he's a little banged up. I know he's a little injured. It is what it is, but again, the passing game, he just hasn't been as sharp. There's just throws that he should be making that he's not making, and that is I think that is a fair criticism of him. But it's also not fair when I'm sitting there watching, and you ended up scoring anyways. But the one touchdown you scored, I mean, you have a beautiful throw to Ryan Williams in the end zone where he's going to have to make a jumping catch to do it, but you're paying this guy over $1 million. You can make a jumping catch in the end zone with a defender around you and just goes right through his hands. And that's been a problem all year. So it's one of those things where I think Ty deserves some of the blame. He has not been the player he was in the first half of the season, but the guys around him also aren't really doing a whole lot to help him out.
And it wasn't just Hollywood in that one. Jeremy Bernard had a couple balls that went through his hands, or there was one, it was near the end that it went through his hands, like hit him right in the chest. Yep. And it was almost like expecting, and I know the Georgia defender like got a finger whatever on it, but it didn't deflect it that much to where it still went through Bernard's hands, hit him in the chest. It's like, oh, okay. It almost felt like all of the drops that benefited Alabama in the Auburn game came back to plague them right here.
That's not a bad point. I mean, yeah, you had the one to Horton right before the interception was thrown where that would have put Alabama, I don't think it was in the red zone. It would have been close to I mean, they would have been around probably like the 25 or 30-yard line of Georgia, if I can remember correctly. And it was just a comeback ball on the sideline, and he goes up, and, I mean, he should have made the catch. He just drops it. It goes through his hands, and that would have set up Alabama in a really good spot, potentially make it 7-7, keep in the ball game, get some of that momentum back. He drops the ball. A play or two later, there's the interception, and again, that was it at that point. Georgia was able to go and score, and that was kind of all she wrote there. So you got to give credit to Georgia. They took care of the opportunities that Alabama gave them. 21 of their 28 points came on touchdowns scored when they started in their own territory with the block punt, the interception, and the late turnover on downs. And I will give credit again. It doesn't matter in these types of situations. I know a lot of people were mad. Well, why did Kalen DeBoer go for it on 4th and 2 late in the game when, because in their mind, right there, you punt the ball away, it's 21-7, you get a stop, you lose by 14, you're still in the playoff, right? But but you allowed them to go and score for the last touchdown, which they did, and win by 21 points. I'll give him credit. He said it after the game. He said, "Look, in that opportunity, there's about 8 minutes left. We're down by 2. If we go down the field and score, we're in this is a ball game."
Yeah.
So he's going to win the game. He's not punting the ball away to prevent, a blowout loss. He's going for it in that situation because if you make it, you still have a chance to potentially win this game, send it to overtime, or, at the very least, maybe it's a 1-score loss instead of a 2 or 3-score loss. So I do give him credit for that. He was trying to win the football game, even though he knew if it didn't work, which it didn't, that it would be, it would look really bad in the box score, but he's trying to win the game. I'll give him credit for it. I know some people didn't like that decision, but ultimately, that was what we would call the anti-Notre Dame decision, right? Is they wanted to compete. And I'm never going to knock somebody that wanted to compete. And, you're fortunate if you're Alabama that it didn't hurt you on Selection Sunday. So a lot that Alabama needs to get right. A lot of these guys that are banged up hopefully will be ready for the Oklahoma game. I know Jam Miller is maybe the one that's closest to coming back. There's some hope that Cuevas could be back for that. Not sure about LT Overton, but a lot of these guys are banged up, right? Like these next couple of weeks, this will be great for Ty. This will be great for Brailsford, right? Who's still not 100%, but maybe will be now for the Oklahoma game. You've got a lot of these guys that are banged up, and it's been a long season, and that's how every team is. But that's why these next couple of weeks of getting people healthy are so important for Alabama, because you hope that if you get healthy, you will see a much different team in Norman coming up on December the 19th. But congratulations to the Georgia Bulldogs. They finished the season or head into postseason play at 12-1 SEC champions, and they are the number 3 seed in the college football playoff. Alabama, the 9 seed, and they still made it in. So we want to open it up to you now. That's enough of reaction from us. Let's hear from you. What are your thoughts on Alabama's performance on Saturday? What are your thoughts on the college football playoff bracket? Your phone calls and your text on the Courtesy GMC text line next here on JOX.
6:33. Welcome back into Morning Jocks. I'm John Saber along with Conrad Van Order. We're about to take your phone calls and your texts. Remember, you can call or text 205-834-9450. That's 205-834-9450. Do not forget also, make sure you don't get caught in the cold. Schedule your system checkup now from a trained comfort specialist. Trane has been recognized 11 consecutive years as America's most trusted HVAC brand and our exclusive home comfort partners here at JOX. Visit Trane.com to find that comfort specialist near you.
And we are going to dedicate the rest of the show to you, our wonderful listeners here on JOX, with your thoughts from everything that happened over the weekend as the college football playoff field is now set. And let's go to your phone lines here. Let's go to Larry. He's on the road. He's been waiting patiently to chime in this morning. How we doing, Larry?
Hey, good morning, guys. John, Conrad, two things. In my life, I with all due respect, I have nothing but respect for Notre Dame, their tradition, and whatever else you want to say about Notre Dame. But for them to drop out because they didn't get obviously chosen for the Final 12. So you're telling me if they would have went 8-4, 9-3, they would have went to a bowl game? That's all I need to say. I don't make any sense whatsoever. And guys, one thing that I think Coach Gilmore, and I don't know if y'all agree or disagree, but as far as Oklahoma, I think the last 5 times Alabama's played Oklahoma were 1-4. I don't know if y'all can check that, but I think I'm correct there. The last time we won is when Tua was quarterback. They beat him in the playoff.
I was about to say, beat him in the playoff. I remember the Trevor Knight game, lost that one in a bowl game. Yeah, it hasn't been great against Oklahoma.
Yeah, but my point is the fact that, we played so bad at 3 turnovers in T-Town, whatever. But I think that, I don't know. It's going to be a great game, guys. But the one thing that has amazed me about this format is, you're talking about one of the most traditional powers of all of college football, and they all of a sudden just drop out because they don't make it. And those guys work their cans off all year long to they all want to go to a bowl game. I don't know. I just don't get it, guys. Love the show. On the road. Take care. Thanks, guys.
Appreciate you, Larry. I mean, I guess I just look at it like you're sending the message that if you don't get your way, quit. Like that, it's embarrassing for a football program that prides themselves on, tradition and it's such a bad look for Notre Dame, in my opinion, that they're acting like who we all know they are. They're the spoiled children in the room, and they want to have their cake and eat it too. And for the first time in a long time, that has not benefited them, and they are facing a direct punishment from choosing not to play in a conference. And they love to. You had their athletic director last week doing interviews talking about how trash the ACC is and how they might have an entryway to the playoff and Notre Dame doesn't. Well, guess what? Join the damn conference and win it every year, but you don't want to play it by the rules. You don't want to play along with that, and then you want to take your ball and pout and go home when you don't get your way. I'm so glad. I just be completely honest with you. I'm so glad that this happened. I'm glad that the committee made the right decision. And it's not. I think Notre Dame's a good team this year. I think that if they had gotten in the field, that they would have been able to potentially win a game or two, make some noise, and who knows? Maybe they end up where they were last year if things go right. But
and sadly, I don't think expanding the playoff is the answer to this, because we in essence just changed from arguing 4, 5, and 6 to now arguing 10, 11, 12, 13. So we got to go to 16. Okay, so
we're going to argue about 17 and 18 then.
So we would have been arguing over Vanderbilt and Utah and teams like, they deserved. All right, like that's not the problem here. The problem is Notre Dame. They didn't meet and fit the criteria. I'm sorry, and that's unfortunate. But also, it's a criteria you set.
Yep,
you were part of the coalition that got together and decided to make this playoff, and this is what y'all wanted.
And you know why I'm also not going to have any sympathy for Notre Dame? That's because they had signed an agreement with the College Football Playoff Committee that starting next season, so in 2026, if Notre Dame is ranked in the top 12, then they will automatically be guaranteed a spot in the playoff. So the conference champion, that whole, essentially the situation they're in now where they were in the top 12, but they got bumped out because of the conference champions, that will not be allowed to happen because of a deal they signed with the college football playoff that goes into effect next year. So, yeah, I have no sympathy for them whatsoever. It's honestly hilarious that this happened to them the year before that goes into effect. And again, you don't have to like me for saying this. Couldn't have happened to a better program. You did it to yourself. I have no sympathy for Notre Dame. Just like, guess what? Nobody had sympathy for an Alabama team last year that was the first team out. And guess what? They went and played in a bowl game against Michigan, and they lost. And it was embarrassing. But guess what? They wanted to go and compete because that's what people with pride and dignity do. But I guess Notre Dame doesn't really have a whole lot of that right now. All right, let's go to Jerry. He wants to chime in on the phone lines this morning. How we doing, Jerry?
Morning, guys. Real quickly, James Madison and Tulane. You can't tell me that you want the 12 best teams. You really would put them against Texas, Vanderbilt, USC, Michigan, and expect them to make a run. This isn't like basketball, in my opinion. You'll have a Cinderella, make it deep, but you're not going to put Tulane or James Madison against any of the top 4 teams and bet money on that and say those teams got a shot.
No, I totally agree.
Just takes away 2 spots. Vanderbilt, Texas, Notre Dame, they're deserving. I think give those other 2 teams the most prestigious bowl you can give them as their reward for their seasons because they do deserve it. But they're not Power 4 quality opponents.
No, I agree. Thank you for the call this morning, Jerry.
Well, I don't know if I fully agree with that. They are Power 4 opponents. I mean, heck, look at what Indiana's doing. More than half that team came from JMU.
Yeah.
Now, would a JMU or would a Tulane or any of the team that made it in last year, will they be able to win 4 games in a row? Probably not. And that's generally what we see in basketball. Okay, yeah, you have your Butlers that make those historic, unprecedented runs, and for the most part, okay, you'll see an upset, maybe 2, but that's about it. Eventually, the more talented teams win out. And as of now, if we're wanting to make all these changes, like you're going to need the group of 5 or group of 6 or whatever, you're going to need their approval to do all this. Otherwise, I guess your other option is to secede. I mean,
I was about to say, I've said for a long time, I think the group of 5, they just need to have their own playoff. And that's my opinion personally, because I agree with, I look at it like this. Do you want the consolation prize of going and getting your butt kicked in a playoff, or do you want to actually go to a playoff that you can compete and win? Because I have a similar opinion of the caller, right? Like, you're much more likely in basketball to see, we have seen people go and make those Cinderella runs. You will never see that in a college football playoff. Now, that doesn't mean Tulane couldn't beat Ole Miss, or, I mean, we saw them beat USC, remember, a couple years ago, right? Like, every now and then you have them win a game, but you're never going to see them win, in my opinion, multiple games. I just don't think that's going to happen. And I do agree. It's not the 12 best teams. It's the 10 best teams and 2 consolation prizes. Look, I think what JMU's done is great. And you bring up a great point about a lot of those players going to Indiana, and now they're the number 1 seed. But JMU has not beaten a single Power 4 team this year. They played 1. It was Louisville. They lost by 2 touchdowns. Louisville's not even ranked in the top 25. Tulane, I think we would all agree, is better than James Madison. We've already seen them play Ole Miss this year, and they got spanked, absolutely spanked. Now, that doesn't mean that it can't be more competitive this time, but again, I think we all agree that those 2 games are gimme games, essentially, for the teams they have to play. And no, it's not the 12 best teams. It's the 10 best teams and 2 teams that also, win a conference, whatever. Also, blame the ACC. Be mad at them that Duke won. That, because James Madison, again, great story. They shouldn't be in there.
Yeah, if Virginia wins that game, or Miami doesn't stumble anywhere, or Tulane's in, and
ACC,
Alabama's
Notre Dame joins the ACC.
Yeah.
There you go. Those are all options. All right,
not that hard.
No, it's not. All right, let's go to Scoops. He wants to talk about the playoff bracket. How we doing, Scoops?
Doing well. I'm going to cover some of it you've already discussed. Really quick, as a Bama fan, I never thought I would say this. I don't think Bama's a playoff team. And I do believe, call me crazy, yes, are they playing the I want to take my ball home card? But in my opinion, from what Notre Dame did the beginning of the year till now, I think that they finished strong. Alabama's been taking on water for weeks now. I mean, weeks. This does not look like the team that whipped out 4 top 25 wins in a row. It does not look like the team that mid-tier season looked polished. This looks like a team that is struggling. This looks like a team that has problems. First and foremost, Roll Tide. Great that we got in. Hopefully we can get healthy, maybe get a playoff win. I do not think this is a playoff team. I do want to ask you guys a question to end this call, but really quick, the validity of the college football playoff right now is a joke. I agree with the last caller. I agree with what you said. James Madison and Tulane, that is a joke. You put them on any field. You put them in my backyard. You put them wherever you want to put them. And you place them against Texas, Notre Dame, Vanderbilt, for that matter, possibly BYU, Utah. Without all those teams that got left out, this is about getting the best in. And what Saber said earlier, I don't think 16 is a fix. You're going to have to find a line where it says, look, if you don't make it, if you don't meet the criteria, if you have an upset moment, too bad. Go home. You're not getting in. Really quick, flipping to the other side of my question, I don't know if it was a possibility that they just couldn't do it, but they already botched up in my opinion, the selections where they were seated. Do you guys have a problem with flip-flopping those so we don't have to see the same crap again? Going Miami against Oklahoma and and then Alabama against Texas A&M. That's my question. Guys, have a great day. Maybe some things get fixed, but look, this is a joke. Y'all have a good day.
I appreciate you there,
have
Scoobs.
a major problem in if they were to do it because of that. Because at that point, you're not doing what you're being tasked with doing. You're being tasked with ranking the teams 1 to 25.
You should be ranking them without thinking of who they would be playing.
Right. It's not your fault. It's not anyone's fault how they end up facing each other. But they need to put the number one team at number one and not think, well, I don't know if I want them facing number 4, so we not need to bump them up or down. No, that affects the integrity of everything that's being set up for this. Now, granted, there may not be all that much in there, but at least if I was on the committee, no, I would not even look at that. You shouldn't, because you're charged with ranking the teams. Now, hey, the format could change, and yeah, it's unfortunate that we have rematches in a game that we rarely, if ever, see that. But when we expanded this out and having more games, like this is going to happen. This is bound to happen.
Yes, and I agree with that in the sense, and that's what they would tell you, right, is, well, that we're just ranking the teams. We're not basing it on who would play who. It's just these are how we would rank the teams and let the field fall where it may. I can also see the other side where some people would go, well, it already feels like you manipulate things to fit a narrative every week, so why couldn't you just manipulate this so that we can get matchups that aren't rematches? I understand both sides of it, but generally, yes, I think you nailed it there, Saber, with they're just ranking the teams as they see them, however those play out. And this year we get 2 rematches. It is what it is. But, hey, if you're one of the millions of people over the weekend that very clearly hate Alabama and are very upset that they got in, you're probably happy because they're playing Oklahoma, a team that they've lost to twice in the last 13 months. So maybe you'll get your way and they'll lose for a third time. I know that would make a lot of people happy. But we want to get to your thoughts now on the text line. It is overflowing with your reaction to the weekend. 205-834-9450, the courtesy GMC text line. That's where we're headed next here on Morning Jocks. Reaction Monday here on Morning Jocks. Time to get to your text here on the Courtesy GMC text line. Your reaction to everything going on over a crazy weekend as Alabama loses 28-7 to Georgia in Atlanta for the SEC title, but it really doesn't matter that much because they don't move at all in the playoff rankings, and they are in the bracket. They will have a rematch with Oklahoma in Norman next Friday, December 19th. That will be Alabama's first college football playoff opponent, and if they get past the Sooners, which they haven't been able to do the last two times they've met, then they will advance to take on Indiana, the #1 overall seed. But before we get to your text, let's hear quickly. This is Kalen DeBoer yesterday speaking with the media after Alabama got into the playoff field. This is him talking about a third game against Oklahoma in a little over a year.
I think just consistent execution. We moved the ball, but it wasn't as consistent as it needed to be. We were, maybe in the fourth quarter, not able to get that drive, and I haven't really gone back and reviewed the film, but it wasn't that long ago. So coming up short at the end of the game was disappointing because that's something we've done a pretty good job of. And so, other than the turnovers, because we got down in their territory and had the big play was the interception for a touchdown. But there's more plays to it than that. There's things that happen that, you'll go back to, but there's things that obviously we'll evaluate and make adjustments to what we saw and what the original plan was.
So there you go. That's Kalen DeBoer, a third opportunity for Alabama to beat Oklahoma under him. Hasn't gone well the first two times. I will just say this. In terms of all the first round matchups you could have gotten if you're Alabama, this is the best one. I know some people won't see it that way, but you go back to this game. I know you had 3 turnovers and you lost. If it wasn't for the turnovers, you were dominating that football game. And again, if it goes like that in Norman and you're able to turn the ball over once or twice and not 3 times, you might find yourself with a victory. So I know it's Oklahoma. I know maybe that's a cursed matchup right now, but again, I think in terms of matchup, that's probably the best you could have hoped for if you're an Alabama fan. And I will go ahead and say this. I've seen about 20 texts this morning asking this question. I will not be going to the game. I know a lot of people. Somebody just texted in and said, I'm an Auburn fan, and if I pay, will you go to Norman and cheer on the Tide for bad luck? I will not be going to the game. So if that makes you feel any better, I hope it does. I already saw some people were texting in, over the weekend, cussing me out for going to Atlanta and thinking that that's the reason that Alabama lost. I promise you, I am flattered. I am not that powerful. And if I was, I would not be focusing on something like Alabama's college football results each and every weekend. All right, these texts coming in, though, on the Courtesy GMC text line. This one says, let's see. It says, come on, guys. The best schedule for Alabama using what metric? Preseason? Alabama has 2 ranked wins and 6 teams on their schedule will finish below 500. They have the best win, but also the worst loss. Notre Dame's a better team overall. Alabama's last 4 games have shown what they really are, and that is not a playoff team. I agree from the eye test perspective that Alabama has not looked great. However, I think what a lot of people have missed in this, there's a lot of people that are evaluating Alabama on the Florida State game and the last 3 or 4 games of this season, which it's fair to point those out because they haven't been pretty. Unfortunately, Alabama played 13 games this year, and you have to evaluate every game they played and not just the bad parts that fit the narrative that people want. Lewis chimes in. He says, congrats to Georgia. Alabama deserved to be in the playoff. Miami was also the correct choice. Conrad, please stay out of Norman. It says the Blue Bloods who built their so-called tradition on the back of the bowl system turn their nose up at it now. It's laughable and a very bad look for Notre Dame. Let's see. In order for Alabama to win or be competitive versus Oklahoma, defense has been solid, but offensively, we have to have a running plan to be able to get at least 3.5 yards per carry. John says, has anyone done a welfare check on Golden Domer? I'm sure he's not doing great this morning. And Bama hater. He says, Georgia's football team should be arrested for assault and battery. The committee can't seem to get their lies straight. Alabama and the SEC were saying they would do away with the championship game if Bama didn't get in. He's not even happy about his own team making the playoff. We're talking about Alabama. We're back tomorrow at 6. Mac and